It was a summer night in northern Michigan. My cousin Alex and I were stuck sleeping in the sunroom of the family cabin because we were the youngest and all the older kids got the real beds. The sunroom, it was covered in windows, every single wall. And when the sun went down, it felt like something out there could see in. That's when my dad came in to say goodnight and decided it was the perfect time for a story. But not just any story, it was a story about a creature called the Michigan Dogman. He told us it stood 7 feet tall. It was half wolf and half man. Piercing blue eyes, a howl that sounded more like a scream. And the worst part? He said it stalked its prey by peering through windows at night. Now, Alex and I didn't get much sleep that night. My dad probably thought he was just messing with a couple of kids. But it turns out, he might have been telling more truth than he realized. The Michigan Dogman, a creature of legend, is a beast described for over 2 centuries. It stands upright, 7 feet tall, covered in fur, eyes that glow in the dark, and a scream that doesn't belong in this world. It's called a myth, a ghost story, an overactive imagination. But what happens when multiple people, separated by geography and time, all report the same thing? Some stories are brief, just a glance in the headlights. Others, more intense, but they all seem to point to something strange hiding in the woods of the Midwest. Let's go back to the beginning. The earliest record of Dogman goes all the way back to 1804. In the dense and unbroken forests of what would later become northern Michigan, a French fur trader was moving quietly through the undergrowth, hoping to trap beaver and otter along a remote riverbed. He was alone, miles from the nearest outpost. His journal, later discovered a collection of colonial-era papers, described an encounter that chilled him to the bone. He wrote of a creature watching him from the edge of his campfire at night. It stood upright, unmoving, its shape half obscured by the trees, but unmistakably tall. He noticed the eyes first, like the glow of embers is what he wrote in his journal, set into the face of a beast. It didn't attack, it didn't growl, it just stood there, watching. He packed his gear before sunrise the next day and abandoned his traps. He never returned to that site again. Now, we believe this may be the earliest known written account of the Dogman-like creature in Michigan history, but it certainly wouldn't be the last. Over 50 years later, in the rugged wilderness of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, another strange sighting emerged, this time in Keweenaw Peninsula. A settler had written home to his brother on the East Coast. He described a frightening moment he couldn't explain. He was out surveying timber lines, making trees, and estimating cuts for winter logging season. It was early morning. Mist clung to the ferns, and the dew soaked his boots. That's when he noticed something moving through the nearby clearing. He assumed it was another logger until it stopped and turned, and it revealed a face unlike anything he's ever seen. He described it as the face of a gray wolf, set atop a broad-shouldered, upright frame. It blinked, took a step forward, then turned and disappeared into a birch forest without a sound. The man was shaken. He left the timber survey incomplete, returned to the homestead, and wrote that what he'd seen in a letter to his brother. That letter was never mailed. It remained folded inside a family Bible for over a century, only discovered by his great-granddaughter after his death. Was it a hallucination? An animal misidentified? Either way, he never stepped foot in that part of the forest again. By the late 1800s, logging had become one of Michigan's booming industries. Wexford County, remote, forested, and harsh, was prime timberland. Dozens of men lived in makeshift camps, sleeping in bunkhouses, and working long days with axes and saws. They were used to danger, falling trees, bears, frostbite, but in 1887, something happened that scared them even more. A small crew had just set up a new site along the Manistee River. The men started hearing strange sounds at night, not the usual animal calls. These were screams, high-pitched, long, echoing, across the ridgeline screams. They looked at first, said, "What is this, a bobcat or a loon?" But then gear started to go missing. A saw blade disappeared. Food was taken from sealed crates. Footprints were found outside the cook tent, but they didn't look like a bear. They looked human, only larger, like much larger. One night, as a group of them sat around the fire, they saw it. A massive black shape crouched near the edge of the woods. At first, they thought it was a bear. Then it stood, not on all fours, but on two legs. Its eyes glowed red in the firelight and let out a scream so loud, so unnatural, that one of the men dropped his mug and ran. The rest followed. The next morning, they packed up what they could and left the site. None of them ever returned. That campsite remained abandoned until it rotted into the forest floor. And the story of the Wexford County Dogman, it began to spread. Now let's fast forward to the 1960s. Reed City, Michigan, a place surrounded by farmland, creeks, and dark timber. That's where a night watchman took a job at a local factory. He lived on the property, in a company-owned house at the edge of the Haymarsh State Game Area. It was quiet work. He made his rounds, checked clocks, and returned to the porch to drink coffee and listen to the woods. But one night, everything went still. No crickets, no birds, just silence. He stood up and scanned the tree line, and then he heard it. A metallic clatter. The chain link fence along the back was rattling. Something was coming through or caught in it. He reached for his revolver, waited and watched. Then, in the glow of the security light, a creature appeared. It was moving on all fours at first, covered in gray-brown hair. But then, it stood up. Broad-shouldered, well over 6 feet tall. Its face, he said, was unmistakably canine, like a wolf, but wrong. It sniffed at the gravel, took a few cautious steps, and passed directly under the pole light. The watchman raised his camera, a 35mm Kodak. He adjusted for low light, held his breath, and took the shot. The shutter echoed louder than he expected. The creature paused, looked toward the porch, then dropped to all fours and vanished into the trees. He never showed the picture publicly. Only years later, when the legend of the Dogman gained traction, did he quietly admit what he saw. And to this day, his children say he never let them play outside after dark. In 1987, just north of Grand Rapids, Michigan, the small town of Sparta sat quietly nestled in cornfields and woods. That fall, 2 young men were heading north on a back road, making their way to a family cabin for a weekend of hunting and fishing. It was getting late, and it was well past midnight. There were no streetlights on that road, just the beam of their headlights and the stretch of dark pavement ahead. Then in the distance, they saw something, a tall figure. At first, they thought it was a man, maybe a hiker, but as they got closer, they realized it was something else entirely. It turned, revealing a face that looked like a wolf, with ears standing tall, eyes reflecting white in the headlights. It didn't run. Instead, it raised its arms and snarled. Both men screamed. They swerved slightly and sped past the creature. For the rest of the drive, they sat stunned in silence. When they finally reached the cabin, neither of them got out of the car for several minutes. Then one of them spoke. Did you see that? The other just nodded. Another commonly told story takes place in 1993 in Reed City again. Now, it was a warm summer night. A teenage girl named Courtney stepped outside after dinner. She was looking for a quiet place to sneak a cigarette behind her parents' barn. The property bordered a thick patch of woods, and the only light came from the moon and a single yard lamp. As she leaned against the wooden siding, she noticed movement out by the tree line. At first, she thought it was a large dog, maybe the neighbor's German Shepherd or a stray. But then, the shape was off. The way it moved was wrong. It was low to the ground, then upright, then low again. She stepped closer, curious, and that's when it turned. The creature stood fully upright. It was at least 6 foot tall, covered in dark fur. Its head was long, narrow, with pointed ears and glowing yellow eyes. They locked eyes for a moment, frozen, neither moved. Then, the creature took one step forward. Courtney dropped the cigarette, turned, and ran full speed back to the house. She locked the door behind her. She told her parents what had happened, and they chalked it up to teenage imagination. Still, she never walked behind that barn again. And in the years that followed, she discovered that others in the area had reported seeing something similar. Same place, same eyes, same shape. Whatever it was, it hadn't been a dream. Some encounters aren't close-ups. They're the kind that leave behind signs, tracks in the snow, broken branches, unanswered sounds in the dark. In 1994, a group of campers were spending the weekend deep in the Ottawa National Forest near Watersmeet. It was in the middle of summer, a quiet evening, stars overhead, the hum of insects all around them. But sometime after midnight, the usual forest sound stopped. Then came a howl, not like a coyote, not like a wolf. This was something different entirely. It was shrill, long and echoing between the trees. The next morning, they discovered massive bipedal footprints circling their campsite. No signs of claw marks, just long, deep impressions in the earth. Too large to be human, too deliberate to be bear, they packed up early and didn't return the following year. Then in 2001, across the state in Alpena, a bow hunter perched high in the tree stand just before dawn. He'd gotten there early, like always, waiting in the stillness for movement below. Then, from the underbrush, he saw something emerge. It was big, dark, shouldered like a man. It moved quietly, then stood upright. He froze. The creature didn't look up, didn't make a sound, just walked into the trees on 2 legs, like a person. He stayed in the tree until mid-morning, then climbed down and left his gear behind. He told his hunting buddies he had seen a bear, but he never hunted alone again. In 2007, an anonymous but well-known Michigan politician was driving from Benzonia to Traverse City. He chose a back road, Cinder Road, a scenic stretch surrounded by dense woods. He came around the bend. His headlights caught a shape crouched near a deer carcass. He slowed down, expecting it to be a bear or perhaps a large dog. But as he got closer, he realized it was upright. It stood well over 6 feet tall, covered in fur, and with a wolf-like face and glowing eyes. Frozen in place, the man watched as the creature turned, looked at him, then dropped to all fours and sprinted across the road in seconds. He pulled over and inspected the area. The deer carcass was torn open and fresh. Beside it, he found a massive footprint. He placed a 12-gauge shotgun shell beside it for the scale and snapped a photo. The print was over 11 inches long. The man has chosen to remain anonymous, but he insists he knows what he saw. Now, the stories of upright wolf-like creatures aren't limited to Michigan. Just across Lake Michigan, in a small farming town known as Elkhorn, Wisconsin, a legend was growing in the very same years that Dogman sightings were making their headlines in Michigan. Elkhorn happens to be where my dad's side of the family is from, and strangely enough, Wexford County is the site of Michigan's earliest Dogman tale, is also where I shot my very first deer. These two towns, separated by a few hundred miles, would become ground zero for two of the largest and strangest cryptid legends in the Midwest history. In Elkhorn, it started with a few local reports in the 1930s. Farmers claimed to see something in their fields late at night, a large creature upright running along fence lines. But it wasn't until the 1980s that the sightings exploded. People described a wolf-like animal, tall and muscular, on 2 legs, digging through roadkill, chasing cars, lurking along the sides of cornfields. One woman saw it crouched on the side of the road at night, eating something with its hands. When she stopped, it stood up and ran away, on 2 legs. Journalist Linda Godfrey began documenting the sightings and published dozens of witness interviews. They weren't thrill seekers or hoaxers, they were farmers, school teachers, teens, and even law enforcement. all describing the exact same thing. Some even drew sketches, the resemblance to the Michigan Dogman, uncanny. Glowing eyes, long snout, muscular torso, and always alone. One creature, never in a pack. Their stories describe a kind of predator that isn't hunting for food, but for something else, whether it be territory, is it observation? Some said it seemed intelligent, like it was studying them. And if both regions, hundreds of miles apart, have legends so alike, it makes you wonder, are these two separate myths, or are they one and the same? Now, some Dogman encounters go beyond just a passing glance. They're not stories told over beers. They're moments that stay with people for decades. Trauma, obsession, even fear. Like the truck driver up in the Upper Peninsula. He was on a back logging road and he was alone. His rig was stopped as he was checking the map when something stepped into the headlights. It was massive, broad-shouldered, covered in dark fur. He said it walked slowly up to the grill of the truck. It sniffed it, then stood up right in front of the windshield. Its eyes reflected the headlights like glass marbles. He sat frozen in his driver's seat, and then it dropped to all fours and vanished into the timber. Shortly after, he transferred off night routes. Or take the story out of Mississippi. A family claimed that they were stalked for 3 nights straight. Whatever it was circled their trailer at night. They heard heavy footprints, something tapping on the siding, scratches around the windows. When it finally stopped, they went outside to find their trash bins torn apart, shredded like paper. They moved 2 months later. Then there's the infamous Gable film. Grainy, low resolution, but for years people believed it. It showed a creature, large and fast, charging through the brush. Before cutting out, the man behind it later admitted it was a hoax. But people wanted to believe because something about it did feel real. And that's the power of these stories. Even the fakes make us wonder. It makes us think, what if they aren't all fake? What if just one of them is true? Okay, let's be honest. Wolves have a reputation. Stories, fairy tales, horror movies, all painting them as a bloodthirsty, unpredictable killer. But if we're being honest, the truth is far more complicated. In the wild, wolves tend to avoid humans. They're cautious, calculating. They live in tightly knit packs and maintain territories. Their diet? Mostly deer, elk, and other ungulates. They hunt by exhausting their prey, using teamwork and endurance rather than brute strength. A wolf that approaches a human usually does so out of curiosity or desperation, which is why so many biologists were shocked when a 32-year-old school teacher named Candace Berner was attacked and killed in 2010. Just outside the remote village of Chignik Lake, Alaska, she'd gone out for a jog near dusk, on a path she'd used many times before. When she didn't return, villagers formed a search party. They found her body the next day, surrounded by wolf tracks and partially consumed. An investigation confirmed it was a healthy, non-rabid wolf pack. This wasn't a sick animal. It was starving. This was something different. It was actually the first confirmed fatal wolf attack on a human in U.S. history, and it shattered the belief that wolves pose absolutely no danger at all to humans. Even so, attacks like that remain extraordinarily rare. Most wolves still run at the sight of a person, which raises the next question. If wolves almost never attack people, then what is the Dogman doing? There's usually a reason: rabies. This is the most historical documented cause. Wolves infected with rabies become erratic, aggressive, and lose their natural fear of humans. Most of the fatal attacks reported in Europe centuries ago stemmed from rabies outbreaks. What about food conditioning? Now, wolves that become too comfortable around humans, usually because they've been fed, either directly or through trash or livestock, can start to associate people with food. And once that fear barrier is gone, you've got a serious problem. Sometimes you can chalk it up to defensive behavior. Just like bears, wolves might act aggressively if you approach a den, get near their pups, or stumble onto a fresh kill. These aren't predatory attacks, they're territorial attacks. And last but not least, captivity. Many of the injuries or deaths caused by wolves in North America have come from captive animals, not wild ones. People try to raise them as pets or keep them in poorly maintained enclosures. Eventually, instincts take over. But here's where it gets strange. The Dogman doesn't behave like any of those examples. It's almost always described as alone. Wolves are rarely solitary for long. It's almost always watching, not attacking. Real wolves flee, bluff charge, or, bite. They don't observe quietly, and it walks on two legs. Wolves might rear up for a moment here and there, but they don't walk on two legs, and certainly not for long distances. Whatever this thing is, it doesn't fit the wolf playbook, and maybe that's the most unsettling part of all. My very first deer hunt took place in Wexford County, Michigan, one of the earliest hotspots for Dogman sightings. And on my dad's side of the family, they come from Elkhorn, Wisconsin, home of the Beast of Bray Road. Two small, quiet towns most people have never even heard of, yet both sit right at the epicenter of this entire legend. And that's partially why I wanted to do this story. It matters to me, it's personal. Now, do I believe in the Dogman? I'll be honest. I think most of these stories are probably hoaxes, misidentifications, or exaggerations, but not all of them. I don't think every person who shared their experience was lying. I believe some of them truly think they saw something. And if you've ever sat in a tree stand before sunrise alone in the dark, your breath fogging up the air while the woods shift and breathe around you, you know how easily shadows can move. I've been sure a stump was a bear. I've sworn I heard footsteps until the sun came up and it all made sense. But the people that say they saw the Dogman, their stories didn't fade with the daylight. Something stuck with them, something they couldn't explain. Do I believe they saw the Dogman? Maybe not exactly the way we picture it, but I do believe they saw something. And that's just enough for me to stay alert and keep one eye on the shadows the next time I climb into my Wexford County tree stand before daylight.